Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Massachusetts Pirate News. I'm joined today by First Officer Steve. Unfortunately, Quartermaster Joe is not able to make it today. We look forward to him joining us next Sunday. As always, we do our best to stream these every Sunday at roughly 7:30. We're not 100% on that, but we try. We try as best we can, and we certainly hope you enjoy these episodes. So, just a couple of things. We are having our officer elections coming up. So, if you're interested in throwing your hat into the ring for those, you have until November 8th, i.e., federal state election day, in order to fill out our form saying you would like to be an officer in the Massachusetts Pirate Party. Of course, you have to be a member, but that's easy enough to rectify. And in addition to that, we have last week's episode that was out there, and we're looking at some other events coming up later on. And of course, in January is going to be will be our quarterly conference. Additionally, November 12th and 13th, we will be joining the Mesh Boston Network at their table at the Boston Anarchist Book Fair. So if you'd like to volunteer there, we'll put a link in the description. So without further ado, we've got two topics to discuss, unless we come up with any more. The first one is, you might have heard that apparently, I know, surprise, surprise, but telecom companies will take government subsidies, specifically in this case, the emergency broadband benefit, which provided $50 of service, or gave low-income Americans a $50 discount off their broadband bill. And surprise, surprise, ISPs aren't actually they're making it hard for people to get those subsidies, or they're saying, oh no, you can only get those subsidies if you use the lower tier services, or any other number of barriers they put into place so that they get the subsidy but don't actually have to pay it out in terms of service. Steve, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'll start with the question. Is this Verizon, Comcast, or all of the above?
All of the above.
Yeah, it is pretty loud. It is kind of a pretty lousy thing. Broadband, while, I think there's a fair argument, I think one could make a fair argument that it's, really a necessity today. And particularly in the pandemic, for people who need to work remotely, to meet remotely, the amount of things, remotely. The amount of just, going to school. It's not, the United States being what it is, we have more expensive broadband than much of the other rest of the developed world. It's slower. I do appreciate the government, the federal government's efforts to kind of close that gap for lower income households, lower income subscribers. But it kind of sucks that the carriers themselves are just not keen on doing that. And it's a little baffling why that would be, particularly since, the government is paying the subsidy. So why, why try to keep people from it unless they're just, who knows? Anyway.
I mean, there's going to be any costs in signing people up, in sending someone out to turn things on, or add, update the wires or add new wires or things like that. I mean, there's an additional cost that's going to go into that, and I'm sure the telecoms and ISPs are more than willing to take Uncle Sam's money and do their best to not actually give any services for that. I mean, it's pure profit, which they can then turn around and send to their taxpayer, their stockholders in stock buybacks. I mean, we've done at least $200 billion over the last 20, 30 years of federal subsidies to ISPs for rolling out fiber, for increasing access. And somehow our rates are still the highest in the world, and we don't have much competition, which is ultimately the way to deal with that.
Yeah, I was going to point taken about the lack of competition. In a lot of parts of the country, if you have a broadband provider, which means one company that can deliver something faster than DSL, you're in good shape. And the telcos, honestly, they've been working on to basically secure their monopoly by limiting, say, the option for municipalities to do muni broadband. So yeah, when they're the only game in town. Yeah, I kind of it really makes me wish that the information services were treated as common carriers, kind of like the phone company used to be. Because I mean, for all practical purposes, what you do on what the way people use the internet now is not, there's plenty of overlap with the way that people have used telephones or the role that television has served, or radio, for example.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, I find it ironic when you see various politicians go and talk about social media are common carriers and websites are common carriers, and so they should allow all viewpoints to appear. And yet these are the same folks that supported the FEC gutting net neutrality, which meant ISPs could discriminate against which bits they allowed to go over their network. It's ultimately political, and neither of those positions are one that supports actual users. ISPs, not having net neutrality is a vast subsidy for them and a harm to competition over the internet and to our use of the internet. And likewise, social media companies, or certainly websites, certainly us, have the ability to have editorial discretion as to what we put up, what we allow on our website. So, but you had a big issue. It's one that's been in the news of late. Do you want to give us the 911?
Well, you can't.
411, sorry.
411 011. I don't know. Well, I mean, you actually you almost set up a pretty nice segue with the comment about the claim of a certain person that social media companies were common carriers, but let's just be clear with the folks at home, they're not. So the big news of the week that I wanted to talk about tonight was the acquisition of Twitter by Elon Musk, of SpaceX and Tesla fame, and who apparently is, during the last couple of years, has decided that he is, I think, a quote unquote free speech absolutist. It's gonna be interesting to see how this squares off with with Twitter as a business, but. At any rate,
just to be clear, he's a free speech absolutist who has said, as long as it doesn't conflict with the law, which, China, Russia, plenty of other countries are quite willing to limit what you can say and pass laws that say you can't say what would be allowed in, say, the United States. Even Germany, you can't talk about, not you're limited to what you can discuss in terms of Nazism or something like that.
Yeah, no Nazi propaganda in Germany, which I personally think that's a good thing. But anyway, like, to just sort of back up a little bit, he, at some point a couple of months ago had offered, or stated an intention of buying Twitter for $44 billion, which was quite a bit more than what it was worth at the time. He hemmed and hawed and tried to back out of the deal, but apparently, there was he had committed himself. Twitter was planning to Twitter, or perhaps Twitter's shareholders, were planning to take him to court to force him to follow through, and he ended up having to follow through towards the end of this past week.
Yeah, they did take him to court, and it looked like he was going to lose.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't, considering what a premium he paid for Twitter, and he had maybe, he could lose $1 billion $1 billion, excuse me, if he didn't carry through with the deal. I'm like, walk away losing the $1 billion seems like a better choice to me. But
yeah, there's so one of the, if you're seeing this after the fact, in the comments or the description of the video, you'll see a link to an article by The Verge, which I think provides a really interesting perspective on social media platforms as a business model. So in a social media network, we think of, users are one of the commodities. The income generally comes from advertising. And, since really the advertisers are your customers, advertisers tend to have some sensitivity about the way and the context in which their advertisements appear. They don't necessarily want to, appear next to something that's blatantly racist, blatantly homophobic. And this is a good thing.
Going into a bar.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole bunch of, you don't want to be the one up there standing next to the asshole. That's really what it comes down to, right? So one of the things that, social media companies end up doing in order to, satisfy or, give their advertisers a sense of security so that they'll spend money, is content moderation. And, whether the ones that have the greater degrees of content moderation, I'm thinking TikTok, they're the ones who tend to make the most money. So one of the things to, I'll be looking out for over the next week is what advertisers start to scale back. I know General Motors already has. They're still use Twitter as part of their customer care platform, but they're kind of putting the advertising campaigns on hold. The idea of, we'll just put it this way: 4chan is not the most popular social networking site on the internet for a reason. And this goes doubly true for 8chan. And on the internet, it's only a short distance between you and the nearest sociopath. And basically people use social. It's a short distance between you and the nearest sociopath, but what the moderation does is it tends to make that distance longer. People go on social media to have fun, to feel good, to talk about what they've been doing, and they don't do that just to be victims of harassment.
Yeah, the only caveat I would say is we've certainly seen in the case of YouTube where you've had people who are LGBTQ plus, or are of a variety of demographics potentially, and not negative demographics, just people, right? Have had their videos demonetized because YouTube doesn't want ads appearing on them. That ultimately, to me, is a problem with their ad system, where they can't go and say, because there are people who are going to want to reach out to the audience of someone who's trans, or someone who's gay or lesbian, or who's queer, and to go and just demonetize them and say, no, you can't get any ad impressions off that, seems to be a problem with their system. Although that kind of gets back. I mean, I despise ads, and so I think for a creator, it is better to encourage people to pay you to create something new via Patreon or some other system, and then give it away for free. And certainly there will be some people who will free ride, but there'll be other people who will be like, wow, this person is doing useful things that I like, and I want to give them $5, $1, $15, whatever someone can give a month, in order to encourage them to keep creating new media, new content or new art that they want to see. And it's a patronage model, and it's a distributed patronage model, and certainly better than ads. But even then, I'm kind of surprised Google hasn't been able to figure that one out.
Yeah. So as pirates, I think we would be remiss if we didn't talk about some of the alternatives. I guess one of the main ones, the open source distributed social networking software, that whole ecosystem has when I last followed it closely, it was evolving and changing very, very quickly. So there were things like GNU Social. Mastodon is probably one of the larger open source networks. But basically, this is an example of where you've taken something like the typical social media workflow or typical social media interactions, and rather than building a product around it, you build a bunch of standards around it, so that different people can build software that talks to each other, and you can run host a service that talks to some other service, and what you basically have to, you don't have advertising, though you do have to have a way to cover the cost of the infrastructure, the computing resources, the storage resources, the bandwidth. But for folks that were thinking about looking at Mastodon or any of the others, well, everyone else is right now, so it's a great time to do it. Yeah, I used to maintain a GNU Social instance, and it's like any other network-based service. It takes a little bit of maintenance, but it's something that it can also be fun to do.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I put some links in the chat, and we'll put them in the description. I mean, additionally, there's stuff like, apparently, there's also now Blue Sky, which is now in private beta. You can find out more at blueskyweb.org, and they have their AT protocol, which will be upon which their social network will reside. And so that's much more of a distributed model as well. And that's Dorsey of Twitter fame is pushing that out. And I think it's great. And we as pirates want to push things in a decentralized way. My concern is you look at email, right? Email is kind of the ultimate extension of a decentralized protocol.
Hmm.
And yet, how many people have as their primary email Gmail?
That is a fair criticism, and you are absolutely right. Um, I don't, but I am totally in the minority, and I realize that.
And so, there was a thread a while ago, I know we retweeted, and they pointed out, just looking at email, it isn't even, you can go and spin up your own instance of an SMTP server, an email server, and then run that. But you have the possibility that you'll be marked as spam,
Hmm.
and it isn't always clear how to get yourself unmarked. I mean, there's like DKIM, and there's other things that you can do, but ultimately there's kind of a list of, these are the acceptable email servers, and if you're not on that list, then you may not have, your email may never go anywhere.
Well, yeah, there's actually a email delivery is its own little niche industry. Where you will have companies that basically rate and score different senders. You know the host your own your own private email, your Googles and Microsofts of the world, fine, but also commercial entities that send mail. Um, any business that runs an email list to keep in touch with their customers. And you can hire, there are companies that basically score them. They will sell, you can incidentally pay a premium to be reviewed for compliance and get a good score. And then the next thing is you turn around and you sell these lists of good senders to different email providers. So it's it's actually a pretty clever racket, but if you're willing to pay enough, you can make sure that your email gets delivered. The question is, are you willing to pay enough? If you're an individual, probably not. And some of probably the hardest thing about running your own email server is just um, is spam, frankly, because there's, as far as I know, there is still more of that floating around the internet than legitimate email. And, blocking it is, for any email service provider, that's keeping that spam to a manageable level is somebody's or some department's full-time job.
Yeah, and so that's the other thing, when I think about Mastodon or GNU Social and maybe even Blue Sky, I mean, I'm just curious. They're small,
Hmm.
and so you can go, and certainly within Mastodon you can have your own instance. You can be like, oh wow, this server is sending us a whole bunch of spam, we're just not going to receive anything from them.
Hmm.
But that's an issue that I'm wondering, that as people get off of Facebook, Twitter, whatever, will we start seeing kind of spam move that way as well?
Well, fortunately, there are also some clever solutions to that problem. I'm blanking on the name of the service, but I know that we happen to use it for our blog. But there are services where
Kismet.
if you enable comments, you can have you can basically send them off to a third party service that will either rate them as will either reject them outright, accept them outright, or sort of put them in a queue for later review. And there are ways to there are ways around this, but ultimately it's either a time or money kind of problem. And in this case, the services are generally cheap enough that it's easier to pay the $2 a month.
Um, I mean, I'll just give you my own experience. So I've been using Akismet for a while on my own personal blog. And I think I went up to like, they were like, oh, you're using it a lot, so you need to pay us more. So they're like, all right, fine. I'll pay you like, I think it was $100 a year.
Mhm.
And then, which is, a lot considering I don't post that much in my blog. But the spam was just overwhelming.
Mhm.
And ultimately Akismet was like, oh yeah, we're just gonna like start dropping these things and not like what you're gonna reach your limit for the month, and we're just gonna like either drop them or they just won't mark them, and
Mhm.
so I'll have to go through and deal with it. And I looked at the number of comments that I got, and I looked at them on spam, and it had to have been at least 1,000 to 1 spam. And I was just like, okay, well, I made one change, and that is anyone doing spam has to have an account on my blog. It went to 0.
Mhm.
I don't even know that I need Akismet at this point,
Yeah.
but that's the problem, right? Is that if I had said, oh, well, I don't want to do that, I want anyone to go and be able to put a comment there. So I'm going to pay what, $200 or $300
Oh,
a
wow.
year. I mean, I'm like, that's not worth it for me if I'm running, and that's my own website. Never mind, like I'm running a website that has, I'm running a server that has, 50 or 100 websites on it.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
wouldn't want to think about what the problem there would be
Right.
and how much that would cost. And
Mhm.
so, that people then weigh it. It's like, oh, well, I can just go to Gmail, or I can just host my website at, Google or Wix or whatever is out there. And it's just their problem,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? So one other thing I just want to mention, there's another good website for social media you may want to consider. It's called scuttlebutt.nz. It is a truly decentralized, not real time social media network. It was created by someone who would go out on their boat for days on end sailing, and they wanted to be able to kind of come back into harbor, connect, download everything, and then go back out. So it's a cool little utility and social media network.
Nice. So, well, that is all I have for tonight. Anything else from you, Jamie?
That is all I have as well. And so with that, we want to thank you all for joining us. Please check us out at masspirates.org. Again, we're looking for folks who want to be officers in the party and want to move us forward into the local elections next year. Please like, share, subscribe, sign up to our mailing list. Links are in the description. We hope you have a wonderful, wonderful week ahead of you. And in addition, please do, well, just be excellent to one another.
Yeah.
I will leave it at that.
Sounds good.
Bye.